I really like this question of how do we select packages, and until Arthur and Joseph mentioned it, I didn't realize that the LaTeX companion is in some sense a curated collection, that Frank Mittelbach is acting as a sort of librarian steering us to satisfactory solutions. I'm not quite sure that's the right person to be doing that, but that's the role that he's taken on with the companion, or one of the roles he's taken on with the companion. Based upon what Nelson said, and also Kelly, going back to this concept of a marketplace, if every LaTeX package provided one page of input and one page of output, and you could just, and there was a URL that gave you those two pages, and that would allow people, in a way, to make their decisions much more quickly. I mean, if you're choosing a CV, a format, a style for a CV, you sort of want to see sample CVs. So if you've got a CV style, you produce a sample CV. If you've got a style for tables or for theorems, you want to do that. Now, something like AMS Math is a big package that does lots of things, but even then it could fit into that general scheme of, well, here's an align, here's something else, here's something else. These are the sorts of things it allows you to do, and that will allow you to make a choice. And Nelson mentioned tech by example, which I think is very much something that beginners would find helpful. And if the community of practice, which includes the beginners and the new users, said, okay, if I want to choose a package, I won't go to CTAN, or if I go to I will go to somewhere where I can see examples side by side of input and output. And there's some beginnings of that in the tech community. Here's mathematical, Nelson's just showing us mathematical tech by example and tech by example, and perhaps he'll like to say a bit more about them when he gets the microphone back again. So to sort of try and bring everything together, if it was a sort of recognized that just as all the doctors are in Harley Street and all the, and all the gentlemen's tailors in Savile Row, and unless you're a fashionable young man, in which case you go to, in the 60s, in which case you go to Carnaby Street, which is where they all hung out. And if you're selling fruit and vegetables, or if you're an opera singer, you go to Covent Garden and so forth. If there's a place which is the place to go for packages, for choosing packages, and to a certain extent it might be Stack Exchange for discussion, then there will be a community of practice, and the people, the packages that didn't abide by that community of practice and no longer drove on the right side of the road and ignored HTML and whatever, would, quite rightly in most cases, I think, not get customers. And that will provide the sort of selection. Do you want to show us a little bit more about the tech by example, mathematics by example?
Yeah, so this volume here, the blue one, mathematical tech by example, was the later one. And I'll just show an input page to see how much of this we can see. So on one side of the screen, you can see these strange mathematical objects that are called commutative diagrams, and then some fairly dense text on the facing page that shows the math markup. And unfortunately, these were all written for plain tech, and thus some of the markup at least would be unfamiliar to LaTeX users. And so we probably need a lot more of this, and probably at a simpler level. The difficulty, I think, is that doing this well takes a lot of work, and everybody is busy these days. And because of the move to electronic documents, and especially free documents, you probably won't make any money doing this. And so unless we could find some wealthy, good technical writers with copious free time in their hands, it's not clear that we can get these things written. Just wanted to show some progress in the LaTeX Companion. These are chapters I've been reading from the Developing LaTeX Companion and sending back to Frank. It appears at this point it's going to be a 2-volume book, but with one ISBN. And we'll have a lot of great information in it. It's been a long time since the second edition appeared. So I look forward to having it in my hands. It's an enormously tough job. I had such tremendous respect for Frank because he's done the huge amount of work to examine thousands of packages and try to decide which are the most useful ones to cover in a book, because you'd be looking at hundreds of thousands of pages of documentation if you tried to document them all. And that's simply impossible for any human to do.
When should the book appear?
We had hoped last year that it would appear this year, but I next year is probably more realistic.
Frank's thinking summer next year.
Yeah, it's technically a very complicated book because there are many instances in it, sort of like the Tech by Example, where there's a small portion on the right-hand side of the page that shows some input, and on the left-hand side, there's the output. And these examples show an extremely wide variety of applications of tech and LaTeX. And so it's an extremely tough job for Frank. I'm helping with proofreading because I'm usually fairly good at spotting errors. And I think this is a very important book that we need to see published. In previous editions, he had a team of people who worked with him and did at least parts of the writing, but this time he's largely on his own. So it will be a great achievement when it appears.
Could I just come in on what Jonathan said about sort of one-page examples? I think that the challenge, certainly as an author of such things, is that I have like a for the impatient first page in one of my packages, and I know over the years, essentially I picked what I think's the highlights for a one-page summary, but every user you get thinks that trying to pick the one-page summary is hard, I suppose is what I'm saying, because yeah, every user obviously has their own what they want, and that's for them that's the one-page summary that should be there. It's a thankless task. Not saying it's not important, but it's hard. I mean, sort of links to what Nelson's just said.
This book is an example of exactly that type of effort, again, oriented towards plain tech, but this was published in 1990. That's 31 years ago, and there hasn't been an update. Again, it's a hard problem, and the market is such that there isn't a lot of profit to be made in it. You know, if you want to be a Tom Clancy and write thrillers, you can do quite well, but the reality is most book authors make very little for the tremendous effort that goes into writing a book, whether it's a simple mystery novel or whether it's a complicated technical document. And so you really have to have people who just think it's intellectually important for them to write things like this.